There are many ways to create explosives, but given their limited materials, they decide to build the simplest possible bomb using whatever they currently have available. Jessica carefully dries a piece of bamboo over the fire while preparing dry soil and a simple fuse. Chin explains that making a reliable fuse is actually the most delicate part of the entire device. Chin then begins assembling the bamboo container in layers. First, he places a layer of dry soil, then inserts the fuse, pours in the gunpowder mixture, and finally seals the remaining space with another layer of packed soil. He presses each layer tightly so the structure remains stable and secure. When everything is ready, he seals the bamboo section with a sturdy bamboo lid. The girls watch closely as he works. His calm confidence makes them wonder if this really is his first time building something like this. Noticing their curious expressions, Chin laughs and admits that he actually has some experience making firecrackers during his childhood. He begins telling a story about when he and his younger school friends once sneaked toward the school bathroom, carrying homemade firecrackers. They lit the fuse quickly and tossed the noisy device through a small window before running away as fast as possible. Moments later, a loud explosion echoed through the building. Older students rushed outside, shouting angrily, while the younger pranksters ran away laughing. Chin finishes the story with a nostalgic smile. Those childhood memories still make him laugh whenever he remembers them. Seeing him quietly chuckling to himself, Helen asks what is so funny. Chin simply replies that he remembered a silly story from when he was young. He then asks the girls to gather the animals and hide safely inside the cave while he tests the explosive. Safety, he explains, is extremely important. The girls quickly move into the cave with the animals and watch nervously from a safe distance as Chin prepares for the test. Chin lights the fuse and turns back toward them. He firmly tells them not to leave the cave until he gives the signal, because the explosion could be dangerous. The fuse catches fire immediately, hissing as the flame races along its length. At the exact moment he planned, the young man swings his arm and throws the bamboo bomb far toward the edge of the forest, making sure it lands well away from the camp. Only a few seconds pass before a sharp, powerful explosion echoes through the woods. The blast startles the entire forest, and dozens of birds perched high in the trees burst into the sky all at once, filling the air with loud, startled cries. Chin watches the result with a satisfied smile. At the same moment, the virtual system in his mind appears and calmly informs him that he has earned 5,000 points for successfully creating and testing the explosive device. Jessica studies the result of the explosion carefully. From her point of view, the blast did not seem very powerful. She suggests that perhaps they simply used too little gunpowder. Chin shakes his head and explains that the issue is not the amount of powder, but rather the quality of the mixture itself. Helen joins the conversation and suggests another possibility. Perhaps the potassium nitrate was not purified well enough, which could have weakened the final product. Behind her, the huge panda still trembles nervously from the loud blast. Chin calmly adds that even high-quality black powder has natural limits. He explains that traditional black powder simply cannot compete with modern explosives such as RDX, TNT, or HMX. Those advanced materials are far more powerful and efficient than anything they can currently produce on the island. Even so, Chin remains confident in his invention. He explains that although the bamboo bomb may not be strong enough to kill a large animal, it will produce an extremely loud explosion. If their enemies are frightened and driven away, that alone will give them a valuable advantage. Later that night, the young survivors decide to create 3 additional bombs. This time, Chin increases the amount of gunpowder inside each one, hoping that the stronger charge will make the explosions more powerful and more useful for defense. Several days later, the group begins carrying out their plan to strengthen the camp's defenses. After discussing different ideas, they initially decide to build a brick wall that could provide a strong and lasting protective barrier. However, once they begin calculating the work required, they quickly realize the problem. Even if they built several kills, they simply would not be able to fire enough bricks under their current conditions. Reluctantly, they abandon the idea as too complicated and unrealistic. Instead, they settle on a more practical solution. They decide to construct a sturdy fence made from tree trunks and thick bamboo poles. This approach is faster and far more achievable with the resources they currently have. By the middle of June, the weather grows brutally hot. The summer sun burns down relentlessly, making outdoor work exhausting and uncomfortable, especially for Chin, who spends most of his days laboring under the blazing sky. Working in such intense heat becomes increasingly difficult. Chin feels his body overheating quickly, and his strength drains faster than usual. It becomes clear that he must find some clever way to deal with the unbearable summer conditions. After one particularly exhausting day, Chin walks into the kitchen area and drinks several cups of water in quick gulps. As he cools down slightly, he begins thinking how wonderful it would be if the water could be chilled with ice. At that exact moment, an idea suddenly flashes through his mind. He remembers the potassium nitrate they purified earlier and realizes they still have a decent amount left. Chin recalls an interesting chemical property of potassium nitrate. When the substance dissolves in water, it absorbs heat from its surroundings. If used correctly, this reaction can actually create ice even in warm conditions. The more potassium nitrate he mixes into the water, the colder the solution becomes. Realizing this, he decides to experiment with the idea and see whether he can produce something refreshing for everyone. He quickly convinces himself that the experiment will not waste any precious resources. Potassium nitrate can easily be recovered and reused afterward, so trying this cooling trick will not harm their supplies. Excited by the idea, Qian decides to make a refreshing dessert. He remembers the fresh berries they recently gathered and begins crushing raspberries and other sweet fruits in a bowl to create a flavorful mixture. Once the cooling process finishes, he pours away the remaining water and is left with a container filled with small pieces of ice. Smiling with satisfaction, he adds the final touch by pouring the berry syrup over the ice to create a colorful dessert. The young man admires his creation and believes he has produced the perfect fruit popsicle. He quickly places a lid over it to protect it from melting, knowing the girls will be back soon. He hopes they will enjoy this cool surprise. Before long, the girls return to camp and greet him cheerfully. Chin quietly smiles to himself, thinking that the perfect moment has arrived to reveal the surprise he prepared for them. Helen proudly hands him a bunch of freshly picked grapes. She happily boasts about her discovery, clearly pleased that she managed to bring back something delicious to share with everyone. Jessica laughs while describing how excited Helen was about her discovery. According to her, Helen was so proud of the grapes that she practically skipped all the way back to camp. Unable to hide his excitement any longer, Chin announces that everyone deserves a reward for their hard work. He invites the girls to gather around the table so he can reveal the special treat he prepared. With a dramatic motion, he lifts the lid off the container. Inside lies a large plate of sparkling fruit ice shining under the sunlight. The girls stare at it in amazement as their faces instantly light up with delight. Without hesitation, the girls eagerly grab the icy dessert. In the unbearable summer heat, something so refreshing feels almost unbelievable, and they immediately begin enjoying the cold treat. Helen nearly melts with happiness as she tastes the fruit ice. The cool sweetness feels heavenly. In her imagination, it is like gliding smoothly across ocean waves while a refreshing breeze washes over her. Jessica, still amazed, asks Chin how he managed to create ice in such heat. Half joking, she wonders if this is some kind of mysterious ancient Chinese magic. Chin laughs and patiently explains the science behind it. The process is actually quite simple. When potassium nitrate dissolves in water, it absorbs heat from the surroundings, lowering the temperature enough to form ice. Jessica praises him warmly for his clever thinking and creativity. She says he is truly intelligent and resourceful. Her sincere compliments make Chin feel slightly embarrassed. Meanwhile, Helen is so busy enjoying the dessert that she barely hears the conversation around her. Her full attention is focused on devouring the delicious fruit ice before it melts. To produce more ice, the group creates a clever cooling system using several pots placed inside each other like nesting dolls. This layered design helps trap cold temperatures and improves the freezing process. To enhance the insulation, they place boar skin between the outer pot and the main cooling chamber. The thick skin reduces heat transfer and helps keep the inside temperature low for a longer time. While Chin works on cooling systems, Jessica keeps herself busy with another project. She spends the entire day gathering grapes and crushing them carefully to prepare ingredients for making wine. The winemaking process turns out to be fairly straightforward. She mixes clean crushed grapes with sugar in a ratio of 10:3. The mixture is then sealed tightly in containers so that fermentation can occur properly without oxygen turning the alcohol into vinegar. When the work is finished, Jessica runs excitedly toward Chin and announces that the wine preparation is complete. Now they simply need to wait patiently for fermentation to finish and turn the mixture into real wine. Helen notices Chin working on something nearby and curiously asks what he is making now. Chin casually replies that he is currently crafting blades for a fan. His answer instantly sparks the girls' curiosity. They look confused and ask what kind of fan he could possibly be building, since no such device had been mentioned before. Chin explains his idea. He plans to create a simple direct drive fan using a long bamboo pole. Blades will be mounted on one end while a tail structure on the other end will help transfer rotational force. Jessica nods thoughtfully when she hears the plan. The design reminds her of early steam engines that once converted steam pressure into mechanical motion. The concept feels strangely familiar to her. July, the hottest month of summer, is approaching quickly. Chin continues working tirelessly, trying to build tools and systems that will make life more comfortable for everyone during the brutal heat. Recently, he has been putting tremendous effort into building a water-cooled boiler. The device is designed to harness steam while also controlling temperature. When the water inside the boiler begins to boil, the steam rotates the fan blades, creating a cooling breeze inside the shelter. The steam then travels through a condenser, cools down, and returns as water to the tank, forming a closed-cycle system. At the same time, the group continues experimenting with fruit ice, improving their technique and making better desserts each time. These small pleasures help them endure the harsh summer heat. Even Hampy has developed a taste for the delicious fruit ice. The animal eagerly waits for another serving, clearly enjoying the refreshing treat during the hot weather. The young survivors spend their afternoons hiding from the heat inside the cool cave. Helen happily remarks that nothing feels better during this terrible heat than a fan blowing gently while eating an icy dessert. Helen suddenly wonders how the golden eagle and its chick are coping with the intense heat outside. Chin reassures her calmly that birds actually have higher body temperatures than humans. In his opinion, the birds are probably quite comfortable. However, by evening the weather suddenly begins to change. Thunder rolls across the sky as dark clouds gather, and soon heavy rain begins to fall. Watching the storm grow stronger, Helen becomes increasingly worried. Their defensive fence is still unfinished, and she fears that if the wild boars return during the storm like last time, they may not be ready to stop them. At the shadowy edge of the forest, a pack of furious boars suddenly emerges from the thick trees, their dark shapes moving through the rain like a living wave. The sight would normally be terrifying, yet this time the young survivors are far better prepared than before. Chin now possesses the unique skills granted to him by the mysterious system, and their small group has gained valuable experience from past dangers. On top of that, they have powerful allies, a gray eagle watching from above and a giant panda ready to fight. Even more importantly, the group has managed to create crude but effective bombs. With these advantages on their side, the situation, while still dangerous, is no longer hopeless. Chin carefully studies the dark forest and quickly understands what is happening. With a serious expression, he announces that a large herd of boars is approaching fast and will likely launch an attack on the camp within minutes. His voice becomes firm as he warns everyone to prepare for defense immediately. There is no panic in his tone, only urgency and determination as he begins organizing their response to the incoming threat. Without wasting a second, Jessica and Chin rush toward the wooden fence surrounding the camp and take up defensive positions where they can see the approaching animals. Helen quickly runs after them, asking anxiously if she can join the fight and help defend the camp as well. However, her request is firmly rejected. The others insist that she stay back where it is safer, unwilling to risk her getting hurt in the coming battle. Moments later, the herd of wild boars bursts out of the forest and into the open clearing in front of the camp. Their heavy hooves pound against the wet ground as they charge forward. The distance between the animals and the camp shrinks to only a few dozen meters, leaving almost no time to react. The young survivors climb onto the wooden fence, gripping their weapons tightly. Rain pours down heavily, soaking everything. Chin squints through the storm and mutters that he never expected the rain to become this intense, making the situation even more chaotic and dangerous. Taking a steady breath, Chin raises his bow and carefully aims at the charging animals. As he pulls the bowstring back, his mind briefly flashes to the long days and sleepless nights they spent building this camp from nothing. Every piece of wood, every wall, every tool represents their hard work and determination to survive. There is no way he will allow these enraged animals to destroy everything they have created. With a swift and decisive motion, Chin releases the bowstring. The arrow slices through the rain-filled air with deadly precision. It strikes the leading boar directly in the head, and the massive animal collapses instantly onto the ground. The clean shot proves that Chin's skills have improved greatly since arriving on the island. However, the fall of one boar does not stop the rest of the herd. Instead of retreating, the animals continue their charge with frightening determination. As they approach the camp, the herd splits into two separate groups, attempting to attack from different directions and overwhelm the defenders. Seeing the split formation, Chin immediately reacts. He shouts commands to the giant panda and the gray eagle, directing them to intercept the group of boars rushing from the left side. Both animals respond instantly, showing complete trust in Chin. Without hesitation, they move to carry out his orders and confront the incoming threat. With an impressive display of power, the massive gray eagle dives down from the sky. Its sharp eyes lock onto a running boar, and with incredible strength it seizes the animal using its powerful claws. The eagle lifts the struggling boar off the ground and into the air. The sudden attack shocks the rest of the herd, creating panic and slowing their aggressive advance toward the camp. At the same time, Hampy the giant panda lets out a deep, thunderous roar that echoes across the clearing. Without any sign of fear, the panda charges directly into a group of boars. Swinging his massive paws with tremendous force, Hampy strikes the animals one after another. His powerful blows push them away from the camp and shake the confidence of the attacking herd. Meanwhile, Chin continues firing arrows one after another with calm precision. Even though the gray eagle and Hampy have successfully pushed back part of the herd, many boars are still charging forward relentlessly. Their numbers remain dangerous, and the defenders must continue fighting to keep them from reaching the camp. Suddenly, a loud voice echoes from behind Chin. Helen is shouting urgently. She tells everyone near the fence to move aside immediately. In her hands, she is holding one of the homemade bombs the group prepared earlier, and her determined expression makes it clear that she intends to use it. Helen runs quickly toward the fence despite the rain pouring down around her. Gathering all the strength she can muster, she throws the bomb toward the cluster of boars charging toward the camp. Her hope is simple but desperate, that this explosive will stop the animals before they break through their defenses. The massive boars suddenly slow down, confused by the strange object flying toward them. For a brief moment, they stop attacking and stare at the unfamiliar thing rolling across the ground in front of them. The animals clearly do not understand the danger that is about to unfold. A split second later, a deafening explosion shatters the air. The blast cuts through the sound of the heavy rain and echoes across the entire area. Dirt and smoke burst outward as the bomb detonates, creating a powerful shock that startles everything nearby. The wild boars are instantly overwhelmed by fear. Loud squeals erupt from the herd as the animals panic. Completely confused by the sudden explosion, they begin running in every direction, desperately trying to escape from the mysterious and terrifying danger. Taking advantage of the chaos, Hampy charges after the fleeing boars. The giant panda catches up with several of them and strikes with his massive paws again and again. Each blow sends the animals tumbling to the ground, further scattering the already terrified herd. Chin watches the fleeing animals and quickly decides that he cannot simply allow them all to escape after attacking the camp. He pulls back his bowstring once more and carefully takes aim at one of the running boars in the distance. Even though the animal is moving quickly through the muddy ground, Chin's arrow flies straight and true. The projectile pierces the boar with perfect accuracy. The wounded animal lets out a final cry before collapsing lifelessly onto the wet earth. At the same time, the gray eagle swoops down again to finish another target. With incredible precision, It grabs a wounded boar in its claws and lifts the struggling animal high into the air. The enormous eagle circles briefly in the sky while gripping the heavy animal. Then, with a sudden motion, it releases the boar. The creature crashes violently into a nearby tree in the forest with a loud, echoing impact. Eventually, the giant panda and the gray eagle stop their pursuit. They watch as the remaining boars flee in total panic back into the dense forest. None of them show any intention of attacking again. Chin slowly surveys the battlefield and notices the many fallen boars scattered across the ground. The sight makes him pause and reflect on what they have done. After thinking about it carefully, Chin realizes that wild boars do not live very long in the wild. If they continue killing large numbers of them like this, the entire population on the island might decline rapidly and struggle to recover in the future. This realization makes Chin understand something important. The group cannot simply slaughter every boar they encounter. These animals are currently their only reliable source of meat on the island. Because of this, he decides that they must stop unnecessary hunting and allow the remaining boars to survive, maintaining a balance that will ensure food for the future. Now that the group has secured a decent supply of meat from the battle, their focus shifts back to improving the camp. The young survivors spend the following days strengthening their defenses, especially preparing for possible boar attacks during heavy rainstorms. They reinforce the wooden fence and finally complete the protective barrier around their camp. 2 weeks later, the camp is fully prepared to face another torrential downpour. The reinforced defenses give everyone a sense of security. Now they no longer need to constantly worry about enraged boars charging into their camp, since the stronger fortifications should be able to hold back any future attacks. As time passes, it begins to feel as though the island has entered an endless rainy season. Gray clouds hang constantly in the sky. To pass the time and lift their spirits during the gloomy weather, the group decides to check on the wine they had started fermenting earlier. According to their estimates, it should finally be ready. Chin carefully opens the lid of the container, holding the fermented liquid. Instantly, a strong and unpleasant smell fills the entire room. Floating on the surface of the liquid is a thick layer of strange white foam that does not look appealing at all. The girls immediately cover their noses with their hands, clearly disturbed by the smell. They begin to worry that the wine may have gone bad or that they prepared it incorrectly. Based on its strange appearance and terrible odor, it looks nothing like the wine they expected to produce. Chin quickly reassures them, explaining calmly that the white foam on the surface is actually caused by carbon dioxide being released during fermentation. He tells them that this reaction is completely normal when making homemade wine and does not mean the drink is spoiled. He then explains that the next step is to filter the liquid carefully. Once the impurities and foam are removed, the wine will become much clearer and suitable for drinking without the unpleasant residue floating on top. After finishing the explanation, Chin takes out several small cups and begins pouring the filtered wine into them. He offers the girls a taste, hoping that the flavor will be much better now that the liquid has been cleaned. Unfortunately, after tasting it, the girls immediately make unhappy faces. They complain that the drink tastes extremely sour. Even though they have tried many kinds of wine before, none of them were nearly as acidic as this strange homemade version. Their disappointment is obvious, but Chin remains optimistic. He believes that the wine simply needs more time to ferment properly. According to him, allowing the process to continue a bit longer should naturally reduce the sharp acidity and improve the taste. After thinking quietly for a while, Chin suddenly comes up with a new idea and excitedly shares it with the girls. Instead of waiting for the wine to improve, he suggests distilling it to produce alcohol. This process could remove the sourness and create a much purer, stronger drink. Chin begins explaining the science behind the idea. Ethyl alcohol, he says, has a lower boiling point than water and begins to boil at around 78 degrees Celsius. Because of this property, it can be separated from water during heating. As the liquid warms, alcohol evaporates faster, and the vapor travels through a bamboo tube where it cools and condenses, eventually dripping into another container as purified alcohol. However, Chin warns them that distillation is not a quick process. It requires constant monitoring and careful temperature control. If they start the process now and remain attentive throughout the day, they should be able to finish by evening and obtain the final result they want. Jessica looks at Chin with curiosity and asks where he learned so much about alcohol production. He speaks about it with surprising confidence, almost like an experienced brewer. Chin simply shrugs and replies that the technique is actually quite simple and widely known. Helen soon returns carrying bamboo sugar and some soda. With obvious curiosity, she asks Chin what exactly they plan to do with these ingredients. Her excitement makes it clear that she cannot wait to see the final result. Chin smiles and tells her to be patient, promising that everything will become clear soon. Chin explains that he intends to mix the distilled alcohol with soda, sugar, and a bit of water in carefully measured proportions. After that, the drink will be cooled down so it becomes refreshing and pleasant, something perfect for drinking during the island's hot days. The drink cools down surprisingly quickly. Once it is ready, Chin confidently offers the glasses to the girls, hoping that this new version will finally match their expectations. The girls take a cautious sip, and their expressions immediately change. This time they are delighted. Helen excitedly tells Chin that the taste feels incredibly familiar. According to her, the drink tastes almost exactly like Jiang Li Bao, a Chinese carbonated beverage that used to be as popular as Pepsi and Cola during the 1990s. Around 2 months pass, and during that time the small survival camp changes dramatically. The young survivors build a proper food storage facility, establish a pottery workshop, and even construct a basic bathroom. Their camp becomes well organized, with clear living and working areas, making their daily life far more comfortable and efficient. Without anyone really noticing at first, summer slowly begins to fade away. The days grow less scorching, and cooler air begins to fill the nights. This subtle change in temperature reminds everyone that autumn is approaching. The gray eagle chick has grown a lot during this time. It is now strong enough to fly confidently through the air. Helen has spent so much time caring for it that the young eagle has become deeply attached to her. It even responds to some of her simple commands. One day, Chin approaches Helen and sincerely thanks her for the clothes she made for him. He tells her that the outfit fits perfectly and feels comfortable, not tight anywhere. His genuine appreciation makes Helen smile warmly. Helen feels proud hearing those words. She knows how much effort she put into sewing the clothes by hand. Her fingers are still wrapped in small bandages from the many cuts she received while working with the thick and tough boar hide. Chin gives special praise to the backpack she crafted from boar hide. The bag is not only extremely durable, but also surprisingly spacious. It can easily hold essential tools like rope and an axe. Despite its simple design, the backpack is practical, sturdy, and very well made. From that day forward, the group begins preparing for the second part of the first stage of their long-term survival plan. Their goal now is to explore the island more thoroughly while continuing to strengthen and expand their camp. According to the plan, Chin intends to travel deeper into the island accompanied by the giant panda and the gray eagle. His goal is to locate the airplane they once discovered before it crashed. Meanwhile, the girls will stay near the camp and explore the surrounding unknown areas to make sure there are no hidden dangers or blind spots nearby. The last time Jessica's plane crashed on the island, Chin barely had the chance to properly explore the surrounding area. Back then, the group was struggling with a serious food shortage, and survival was their only concern. Every moment had been spent searching for something to eat rather than studying the land around them. Because of that pressure, Chin had to leave the region quickly without learning much about it. This time things were completely different. The young survivors prepared themselves far more carefully before setting out. They gathered enough food supplies to last for 10 full days and planned their journey with patience and strategy. Their goal was ambitious: to walk across the island and examine every part of it as thoroughly as possible, hoping to understand the land better and uncover useful resources. Autumn had quietly arrived on the island, bringing with it colder nights and strong winds that swept across the open land. Knowing the weather could turn harsh, Chin packed carefully before leaving. He took a tent for shelter and Jessica's sleeping bag to keep himself warm during the chilly nights, making sure he would stay comfortable even far from camp. By the following day, Chin finally reached the place where the plane had crashed earlier. But his real interest was not the wreckage itself. From the top of a distant hill during his previous visit, he had noticed a volcano rising in the distance. Now that he had returned, he intended to examine that mysterious volcano much more closely. The wide volcanic plain could roughly be divided into two very different regions. The outer part consisted mostly of open grassy meadows stretching far across the land. In contrast, the inner area was filled with hills covered in dense bushes and scattered trees. At the very center of this rugged landscape stood the volcano itself, towering quietly over everything around it. As Chin approached the base of the volcano, he discovered that the ground was crowded with thick, thorny bushes. Their sharp branches scratched against everything that passed through. Fortunately, he had worn sturdy pants before setting out. Without that protection, his legs would have been badly torn apart while forcing his way through the prickly thicket. The giant panda walking beside him suddenly slowed down and came to a full stop. Chin immediately noticed the change in the animal's behavior. Judging by its uneasy posture, it was becoming harder for the panda to continue climbing because the slope ahead was growing steeper and more difficult to navigate. Using the trainer's seal that connected him to the animal, Chin focused on understanding what was bothering the panda. Through that strange bond, he sensed the animal's discomfort. The panda had caught a strong and unpleasant smell in the air and clearly disliked it. After thinking for a moment, Chin realized the source of the odor. It was sulfur rising from the volcanic ground. Understanding that the environment might become dangerous, Chin gently ordered the panda to remain where it was. He did not want to risk exposing the animal to harmful gases or unstable ground. Instead, he decided to continue forward alone so he could check the situation himself. After climbing a little higher, Chin reached a small plateau. From there he noticed a shallow pool of water bubbling quietly in the ground. The water constantly released faint clouds of gas into the air. Most of the vapor was simple steam, but mixed within it were other gases such as carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and sulfur dioxide drifting upward from the volcanic earth. Seeing this strange place, Chin suddenly felt that fortune might be smiling on him. The presence of sulfur deposits here meant that he could potentially gather more materials for making explosives. For someone trying to survive in such a dangerous environment, that discovery could become extremely valuable. He also remembered that water flowing from geothermal springs often carried many heavy metal compounds dissolved within it. Under certain natural conditions, those compounds reacted with surrounding rocks and slowly formed different types of minerals. That meant the area around the volcano could contain valuable resources hidden beneath the surface. While searching the rocky ground, Chin managed to pick up a large grayish mineral chunk that looked unusual. Later he realized it was likely galena. Unfortunately, he had no real knowledge about minerals and could not identify it properly. Because of that, he decided he would need to spend system points to purchase a field mineral encyclopedia to understand exactly what he had found. After purchasing the encyclopedia through the system, Chin carefully studied the information it provided. He learned that the mineral was a sulfide commonly formed in volcanic deposits. It was often found together with other minerals such as sphalerite and sometimes associated with quartz and lead ores. That meant the stone he discovered might actually be quite valuable. By the time evening arrived, Chin had already set up a small campsite halfway up the hillside. Sitting near his tent, he made plans for the coming days. His goal was clear. He wanted to search the volcanic area more thoroughly for useful minerals, believing the ground near the crater could hide many valuable discoveries. At one point, Chin even tried to dig into the ground to extract ore from beneath the surface. However, the soil and rock around the crater turned out to be extremely hard. His stone pickaxe could barely withstand a few strikes before snapping apart. The broken tool nearly injured him, reminding him how dangerous mining could be without proper equipment. That moment made Chin realize something frustrating. Mining iron ore was far more difficult than he had imagined. To break tough rock efficiently, he would need a proper iron pickaxe. But in order to create an iron pickaxe, he first needed iron ore. The situation felt like a frustrating loop with no simple solution. High above him in the sky, the gray eagle began circling slowly. Chin noticed the familiar bird immediately. Through the strange connection he shared with the eagle, he understood that the bird had come carrying a message from Helen back at the camp. Watching the powerful bird glide effortlessly through the air, Chin could not help feeling a little jealous. The distance that had taken him an entire day to travel on foot had taken the gray eagle barely an hour to cross. The advantage of wings was truly remarkable. Helen's clever idea to use the gray eagle as a messenger turned out to be incredibly practical. Attached to the bird was a small note from her. In the message, she reassured Chin that everything at the camp was fine and gently reminded him to stay safe. Reading those simple words warmed his heart. It meant a lot to him knowing that the others were thinking about him and worrying for his safety. Preparing to approach the strange lake again, Chin wrapped a piece of cloth around his face like a mask. The makeshift protection would help reduce the harmful fumes entering his lungs. Only after securing the mask did he slowly move closer to the poisonous water. He carefully lowered a bamboo hose into the strange liquid, hoping to collect some of it for future use. However, after observing it closely, he quickly realized the idea would not work. The liquid contained an extremely high concentration of sulfuric acid. Storing such a substance inside a simple bamboo container would be impossible. The following day, Chin set out again to explore the surrounding plains. His hope was to find resources that were not available in the forest near the camp. Unfortunately, the vast open land turned out to be disappointingly empty. The plains stretched endlessly with very little variety or useful materials. On the morning of the 8th day of his journey, Chin decided it was finally time to return to camp. He gathered the sulfur and minerals he had collected during his exploration. However, because he would not be returning directly from the volcano this time, he needed to carefully reconsider his route back, making the journey slightly more complicated. Riding on the back of the giant panda, Chin left the volcanic plain behind. Unfortunately, his chosen path soon led him back to a place he remembered all too well, the swamp that had nearly trapped him before. Seeing the familiar wet ground ahead, Chin felt uneasy. He wondered if choosing another route might be safer. The last time he passed through this swamp with Jessica, the situation had almost cost them their lives. The memory was still fresh in his mind. Back then, the swamp had been covered by incredibly thick fog. The mist was so dense that they could barely see more than 3 meters ahead of them. Every step forward had been filled with uncertainty and danger. But now the situation looked slightly different. The fog covering the swamp was noticeably thinner than before. Chin realized that the fog seemed to change its density over time. Since the fog's thickness was linked to methane concentration in the swamp, lighter fog likely meant the area was currently safer to cross. Even so, Chin decided to remain cautious. He gave a command to the gray eagle and sent the bird ahead to scout the area. From the air, the eagle could easily avoid dangerous ground and provide a clearer understanding of what lay ahead. Through their unusual mental connection, Chin soon received a visual impression from the eagle. The bird reported that visibility further ahead was fairly clear. The path through the swamp seemed much less dangerous than it had been during his previous visit. Even with that reassuring information, Chin understood that he still needed to learn more about the swamp. If he could determine how often the fog appeared and disappeared, he could safely return here in the future to collect valuable resources without putting his life at risk. Suddenly, the gray eagle sent another surprising message. The bird had spotted several strange two-legged creatures moving nearby. Hearing this immediately shocked Chin. He had never expected to encounter other people in such a remote and dangerous place. Unfortunately, the fog still limited visibility enough that Chin could not clearly identify who those figures were. Unable to see them directly, he ordered the panda to remain where it was. At the same time, he commanded the gray eagle to guide him straight toward the mysterious silhouettes. Activating his special cheetah speed ability, Chin suddenly burst into motion. With this skill, he could run at speeds reaching nearly 100 kilometers per hour. At that pace, he could cover about 5 kilometers in only 3 minutes and quickly reach the place where the eagle had seen the strange figures. Even while running, Chin reminded himself to stay careful. The fog in the swamp could thicken again at any moment. Going too deep into such terrain would be extremely risky. If the mist suddenly became dense, he planned to rely on his speed ability to escape immediately. After sprinting roughly 500 meters through the damp terrain, Chin finally saw movement ahead. A group of people was approaching from the distance, heading directly toward his direction. Looking more closely, he realized that a group of heavily armed warriors, dressed like Vikings, were chasing a single fleeing girl. The girl was running desperately, clearly trying to escape from the men who pursued her relentlessly. Even from a distance, Chin could see the intense expression in her eyes. There was both desperation and fierce determination there. Despite being chased, she refused to give up easily and continued searching for a way to survive. Suddenly, the girl stopped running. She turned around sharply and faced the approaching warriors. Raising her swords, she took a firm fighting stance, clearly ready to defend herself even if the odds were against her. Without hesitation, she launched forward and began striking the massive Vikings with a series of fast, powerful attacks. Her movements were quick and precise, forcing the large warriors to struggle as they tried to block her furious blows. One of the Vikings lunged forward, attempting to grab her and end the fight quickly. But the girl reacted instantly. With lightning-fast reflexes, she struck him and then leaped upward, vaulting cleanly over the large warrior's body. Landing behind him, she swung her weapon with incredible force toward the back of his head. The strike would have killed him instantly if not for the metal helmet protecting his skull. Using the momentum of her movement, the girl performed several agile aerial spins and quickly jumped backward. She created distance between herself and the warriors, avoiding the dangerous counterattacks they were preparing. However, the Vikings were experienced fighters. They moved slowly and carefully, spreading out around her. Step by step, they tightened their formation, surrounding the girl from every side and leaving her almost no path to escape. Realizing that the circle around her was closing, the girl understood that her chances were shrinking with every passing moment. Gathering the last of her strength, she prepared for one final attempt to break through the encirclement. Then she shouted a fierce battle cry that echoed across the swamp. Hidden behind a nearby tree, Chin watched the entire scene unfold with shock and fascination. He had never expected to witness something like this here. It was immediately clear to him that the situation was extremely dangerous for the girl. At first, Chin could not fully understand what was happening. But one thing became obvious very quickly. This was no staged fight. The warriors aimed for deadly weak points, and every strike was meant to kill. This was a real life-and-death battle. Watching closely, Chin focused on the girl's desperate struggle. Something about her determination moved him deeply. In that moment, he decided that he would try to save her, even if helping meant putting his own life in danger. Quietly reaching into his bag, Chin pulled out a small clay cup. Inside it, he began carefully mixing potassium nitrate, sodium bicarbonate, and sugar. By combining the ingredients in precise amounts, he started preparing a makeshift smoke bomb. His plan was simple but risky. He would wait for the perfect moment and then attack the Vikings with the smoke bomb. The sudden confusion might give the girl a chance to break free from the deadly encirclement. Just as he finished preparing the mixture, the system suddenly notified him that he had earned 3,000 points for successfully creating a smoke bomb. Chin slowly raises his bow and points it toward the powerful warriors ahead. His hands tremble slightly. For the first time in his life, he is aiming a weapon not at an animal, but at another human being. The weight of that moment presses heavily on his chest, making his heart pound with nervous tension. Sweat begins to run down the young man's face as he struggles to steady his breathing. Fear tries to creep into his mind, but the desperate situation forces him to act. The sight of the girl fighting alone pushes him forward. Gathering his courage, Chin releases the bowstring. His intention is not to kill, only to injure and disrupt the attackers. The arrow flies with impressive precision. The arrow strikes one of the Vikings directly in the leg. The warrior cries out in pain as the sudden attack breaks the tight circle they had formed. Their formation weakens for a moment, creating a small opening in their otherwise solid encirclement. The girl reacts instantly. Seeing the brief gap between the warriors, she lunges forward without hesitation. With incredible speed and determination, she pushes through the opening, escaping the deadly ring that had almost trapped her completely. The Vikings roar in anger and frustration when they realize their prey is slipping away. Some shout curses while others cry out in pain. Without wasting a second, they charge forward again, determined not to let the girl escape from their grasp. Chin knows he must slow them down. Acting quickly, he draws and releases 2 more arrows toward the pursuing warriors. His goal is not to defeat them outright, but to delay them long enough for the girl to gain some distance and safety. However, the warriors are experienced fighters. With practiced movements, they raise their massive wooden shields. The arrows strike the shields with dull thuds and fall harmlessly aside. proving that these men are not easy opponents. Realizing arrows will not be enough, Chin quickly lights the fuse of his smoke bomb. At the same time, the girl reaches the tree where he is hiding. She stops for a brief moment and looks at him with wide, surprised eyes, clearly confused by the strange stranger suddenly helping her. She watches closely as Chin performs quick movements with the odd object in his hands. Before she can even ask a question, he finishes preparing it and throws the smoking device straight toward the advancing Vikings. A loud bang explodes across the clearing. Within seconds, thick clouds of smoke begin spreading rapidly through the forest area, swallowing the battlefield in a gray fog that blocks visibility. The girl freezes for a second, staring in shock at the strange cloud of smoke filling the clearing. Chin quickly snaps at her, telling her to stop standing there and run immediately while their enemies are still confused and disoriented. Finally understanding, the girl turns and runs beside him. Behind them, the smoke slowly begins to thin. One of the Viking leaders shouts angrily, ordering his men to chase the fugitives at once. The warrior who had been struck in the leg struggles to keep up, limping painfully while loudly cursing in Norwegian. While running, Chin glances back and sees the Vikings closing the distance again. Their speed and discipline reveal that they are strong, skilled fighters who will not give up easily. Even with all the strange abilities granted by the system, Chin knows deep down that facing such warriors head-on in open combat would be extremely dangerous for him. As he continues running, his eyes fall on the girl's leg. Only now does he notice a serious wound there. Blood stains her clothing, and her movements are becoming slower. Chin immediately realizes she cannot keep this pace for long. In only a few minutes, the Vikings could easily catch them both. Chin makes a quick decision. He stops abruptly and turns to the girl, ordering her to climb onto his back so he can carry her. He explains with urgency that this is the only way they might increase their speed enough to escape their pursuers. The stranger speaks quickly in Arabic, thanking him for helping her. However, she insists that he should save himself instead. She says she will stay behind and hold the enemies off so he can escape safely. Without hesitation, the brave girl steps forward, pulling out her two combat blades once more. Her posture shows absolute courage as she prepares to face the warriors again. Chin does not understand a single word of Arabic, but he does not need to. Her gestures, her determined expression, and the way she positions herself make her intentions perfectly clear. She plans to fight the Vikings alone to buy him time. Instead of arguing, Chin suddenly rushes forward. Before the girl can react, he grabs her and throws her over his shoulder in one swift motion. The unexpected action leaves her completely shocked. Immediately afterward, Chin activates his cheetah speed ability. He knows the skill cannot last long while carrying extra weight, probably less than 2 minutes. Still, he hopes that within that short burst of speed, he can create enough distance to escape. Just as he begins running, a message suddenly reaches him through his connection with the Gray Eagle. The bird reports spotting an enormous snake nearby. The warning instantly sends a chill through Chin's body. Moments later, the massive creature appears in the clearing. Moving with terrifying speed, a gigantic titanoboa slithers into view where Chin, the girl, and the pursuing Vikings are located. Even the hardened warriors pause when they see the monster. They stare in stunned disbelief at the enormous snake, a creature far larger than anything they have ever encountered before. Seeing the confusion among the Vikings, Chin tries to take advantage of the moment. He desperately runs toward the forest, hoping the giant snake will choose to attack the warriors instead of chasing him and the girl. Unfortunately, his hope quickly shatters. With growing horror, Chin realizes that the titanoboa completely ignores the large group of Vikings. Instead, the monstrous reptile locks its attention directly onto him and the injured girl. The enormous snake opens its gigantic jaws wide. Chin immediately understands that the creature is incredibly fast. If he wants to survive, he will need to rely on his special abilities once again. The titanoboa strikes with terrifying speed. At the very last possible second, Chin manages to jump sideways, barely avoiding the crushing attack. Seeing the danger, the girl suddenly makes a bold move. With fierce determination, she leaps high into the air and charges straight toward the enormous snake. She lands directly on the titanoboa's thick body and begins sprinting along its massive coils, racing toward the creature's head. Even though the snake's body is angled and its scales are extremely slippery, the girl somehow keeps her balance and continues moving forward across the writhing surface. Reaching the creature's neck, she drives her sword downward with all her strength. The Titanoboa releases a deafening roar and thrashes violently around the clearing, trying to shake off the attacker that dared to wound it. The violent shaking becomes impossible to withstand. The powerful movements of the wounded snake throw the girl off balance, and she is flung high into the air before falling away from the creature's body. She crashes down toward the ground and fails to roll or brace herself properly. The impact hits her hard, knocking the breath from her lungs. The Titanoboa immediately turns toward the fallen girl. Its terrifying mouth opens wide as it lunges forward, preparing to deliver a deadly strike. Using his cheetah speed skill once more, Shin dashes forward at the last possible second. He grabs the girl and pulls her aside just before the snake's massive jaws slam shut where she had been lying. Both of them tumble to the ground. Instinctively, Shin positions himself over her, shielding her body with his own as they struggle to recover from the fall. The enormous snake slowly slithers closer. Its tongue flicks out repeatedly while it releases a long, threatening hiss that echoes through the clearing. Suddenly, Shin pulls out one of his homemade bombs. With perfect timing, he throws it directly into the Titanoboa's open mouth. A split second later, a violent explosion erupts from inside the monster. The giant snake collapses heavily onto the ground, its massive body twitching weakly. Shin believes the explosion must have destroyed its insides, killing the creature from within. The stranger stares in shock at everything that just happened. Shin quickly tells her to snap out of it because they cannot stay here. They must leave this dangerous place immediately. Without wasting another second, the two of them sprint toward the nearby forest, leaving the enormous smoking body of the reptile behind them. Just as they reach the forest edge, a horrifying roar shakes the air. At the same time, powerful vibrations ripple through the ground beneath their feet. Shin slowly turns his head and feels his stomach drop. To his disbelief, the giant reptile is still alive. The wounded Titanoboa lifts its massive body high into the air and roars furiously. Moments later, its burning eyes lock onto the fleeing pair, and it rushes toward them with terrifying speed. Shin and the girl run with everything they have, pushing their exhausted bodies toward the safety of the forest. While running, the girl speaks urgently in Arabic. Though Shin cannot understand her words, her tone clearly suggests that fighting the monstrous snake would be nearly impossible. She seems convinced that resisting it is hopeless. They dive into thick bushes and hide. The Titanoboa begins searching the area, using heat-sensing organs near its snout to detect them. However, blood pours from its injured mouth. Shin hopes the damage has weakened its senses enough to give them a small advantage. Believing this might be their opportunity, Shin quietly signals his trained gray eagle. He plans to use the bird to distract the giant reptile. Responding immediately, the powerful eagle lets out a sharp cry and dives from the sky at incredible speed, swooping down toward the massive Titanoboa to draw its attention. The gray eagle dives with deadly precision and rakes its sharp talons across the Titanoboa's thick scales. The attack leaves deep wounds along the giant snake's body. Startled and angered by the sudden assault from above, the enormous reptile stops searching for the hidden humans and shifts its full attention toward the new threat circling in the sky. The massive golden gray eagle does not fly away after striking. Instead, it deliberately stays within sight of the snake, circling and screeching loudly. Its movements are calculated, almost teasing, provoking the giant reptile again and again in order to draw it farther away from the place where the young people are hiding. Shin gently adjusts the girl's cloak, making sure it covers her properly. In a calm voice, he explains through simple gestures and reassuring tone that they are relatively safe now. For the moment, the immediate danger seems to have passed, and the snake is distracted elsewhere. Shin leads the injured girl carefully through the damp ground until they reach the spot where the giant panda has been waiting patiently. The moment the stranger notices the massive black and white creature standing there, her entire posture stiffens in alarm. Reacting instinctively, the girl steps forward with surprising bravery. She quickly draws both of her swords, believing that the enormous animal in front of them must be a dangerous wild beast that could attack at any moment. Chin immediately steps forward and claps his hands loudly. In response, Hampy calmly lowers his huge body to the ground, showing complete obedience. The girl stares in shock, clearly not expecting the giant panda to follow the young man's command so easily. Hampy simply looks at her with tired eyes, watching quietly without showing any sign of aggression. To reassure her, Chin gently pats the panda's thick fur and smiles. Through gestures and a relaxed tone, he tries to explain that the animal is not dangerous at all. Instead, Hampy is their companion and trusted friend, someone who helps protect them. Suddenly, the girl drops to her knees on the ground. She lowers her head deeply and begins bowing repeatedly while whispering something in Arabic under her breath, as if offering thanks or respect. Chin exchanges a puzzled glance with the panda. Both of them seem equally confused by the girl's unexpected reaction. Hoping to move faster through the swamp, Chin decides it would be easier if she rode on Hampy's back. However, the girl becomes completely terrified at the idea and freezes in place. After spending some time calming her down, Chin finally manages to convince the girl that the panda will not harm her. Slowly, she relaxes enough to continue moving. Soon the group manages to leave the swamp behind. Chin begins looking for a quiet and safe place where they can rest for a while. Opening his travel bag, Chin carefully examines the girl's injuries. He notices a deep cut on her arm that has been bleeding steadily. Even worse, her thigh has a more serious wound that clearly requires urgent treatment and proper bandaging. While the girl tries to gather dry twigs and brushwood to start a fire using traditional methods, Chin decides to surprise her. He pulls out a small lighter and sparks a flame instantly, lighting the fire within seconds. The girl watches with wide eyes filled with amazement. She has obviously never seen such a device before. To her, it looks like some kind of magical object that can summon fire from a tiny metal box. A moment later, Chin notices her picking up a burning stick from the fire. He quickly realizes what she intends to do. She plans to cauterize her wounds with the burning wood to stop infection. Chin immediately stops her with a firm gesture. He explains through movements and simple actions that he has a better way to treat the wounds. Using antiseptic and clean bandages will be far safer and far more effective than burning the injury. The girl watches closely as Chin begins preparing his supplies. Everything he does seems strange and unfamiliar to her. Before starting, he signals for her to stay calm and warns her that the next part will sting a little. When the antiseptic touches the wound, the pain is sharp and intense. The girl's face tightens for a moment, but she refuses to cry out. She endures the pain silently, showing impressive strength and dignity. Chin then turns his attention to the injury on her leg. It looks far worse than the cut on her arm. He carefully thinks about how to treat it without frightening her with unfamiliar medical actions while still giving the proper care she needs. Pointing gently toward her injured leg, Chin uses simple gestures to explain that the wound must be cleaned and bandaged properly before it becomes infected. The girl hesitates briefly but then lifts the edge of her skirt to reveal the wound. The moment Chin sees the injury clearly, he reacts strongly. The cut is deeper than he expected and looks quite serious. For a second, he takes a deep breath and forces himself to stay calm. Quietly repeating in his mind that he simply needs to give first aid, Chin focuses on the task and prepares to treat the wound carefully. He pours the remaining antiseptic directly onto the injury. At the same time, he watches her reaction closely, hoping she will understand that the painful treatment is necessary. The pain is intense, but the girl clenches her teeth and bears it bravely. She refuses to scream, clearly unwilling to show weakness in front of the young man helping her. Once the wound is cleaned and bandaged properly, the girl's condition improves noticeably. The bleeding slows, and the relief on her face shows that the treatment has helped. Exhausted after such a chaotic day, the girl eventually falls asleep beneath a nearby tree. As the night air grows colder, Chin worries that she might freeze, so he decides to carry her into the tent where it is warmer. However, the moment he lifts her, the girl suddenly wakes up. Still half asleep and confused, she misunderstands the situation and believes the young man may be trying to harm her. Before Chin can even react, she swings her hand and delivers a sharp slap across his face. The sudden attack catches him completely off guard. Chin rubs his cheek stunned and slightly offended. Quickly, he begins trying to explain through gestures that he only wanted to help her stay warm and safe inside the tent. But the girl is still on edge. Without calming down, she suddenly swings one of her swords toward him. Chin barely manages to dodge the unexpected strike. Not giving him time to recover, the girl charges forward again. She knocks him to the ground while shouting loudly in Arabic, clearly overwhelmed by fear and confusion. After a few seconds, reality begins to sink in. The girl realizes what she has done and immediately stops. She drops to her knees, bowing her head and sincerely asking the young man for forgiveness. Chin helps her up and gently leads her toward the tent. He does not seem angry. Deep down, he understands that her reaction came from fear and the harsh life she has been forced to live. Sometime later, a loud rumbling sound comes from the girl's stomach. Embarrassed and clearly hungry, she even taps her stomach as if scolding it. Chin smiles slightly and hands her a portion of smoked boar meat from his supplies. He hopes the food will help restore her strength and calm her hunger. The girl gratefully accepts the food and once again begins bowing deeply in thanks. Chin quickly gestures for her to stop, feeling awkward about the constant formal gratitude. He offers her a sleeping bag so she can rest comfortably during the night. However, the girl politely refuses. Instead, she wraps herself tightly in her thick cloak and curls up in the corner of the tent, quickly falling asleep. Chin decides her coat looks warm enough. Fortunately, the cold night passes without trouble. The next morning, Chin suddenly wakes up after feeling a small bump against his head. At the same time, he hears a loud shout coming from outside the tent. He rushes outside and discovers the girl fighting fiercely with the gray eagle circling above her. The bird keeps swooping down while she tries to defend herself. Chin quickly begs her to stop, desperately trying to explain that the eagle is actually their ally. The huge eagle finally lands calmly on Chin's outstretched arm. This scene shocks the girl even more, because she never imagined a human and a bird could share such a close bond. Chin gently praises the brave eagle for its loyalty and courage during the battle the day before. Chin tries several different ways to communicate with the girl using gestures and simple words. However, it quickly becomes clear that communicating with her is even more difficult than when he first met Jessica. Eventually, he decides the best solution is to bring her back to the camp. There, surrounded by familiar tools and friends, it might be easier to find a way to understand each other. When Chin finally returns to camp, the girls notice him approaching and immediately step out of the cave to greet him. They look curious and excited, eager to hear about the adventures he experienced while away. Chin briefly describes everything that happened during his journey, including the terrifying encounter with the giant snake. He then introduces the mysterious girl he brought with him. Jessica glances at the stranger and then teasingly comments that Chin seems to have a habit of rescuing girls like her. She jokingly suggests that this mysterious type must be exactly his taste. The stranger greets the group politely in Arabic. Through gestures and respectful posture, she tries to explain that she believes they are powerful sorcerers because of the strange things she has witnessed. Her words leave everyone surprised. Then, to everyone's amazement, Jessica suddenly responds to the girl in fluent Arabic. She calmly explains that they are not sorcerers at all and that everything the girl saw was simply a misunderstanding. Helen stares at Jessica in complete shock. She never knew Jessica could speak Arabic. She quickly shares her surprise with Chin, who is equally stunned by this unexpected discovery. After speaking with the stranger for a while, Jessica returns to the others. She explains that she learned quite a lot about the girl's background, information that will help them understand her much better.